Welcome to That Medic Network's webinar series. My name is Lahari Ramani, and I am the U.S. Leadership Webinar host. With me today, I have Shen Ning, a sixth-year MD PhD student at Boston University. Shen, thank you so much for sitting with us today. To begin, I want to first ask you, what made you get into medicine? What first got you interested?
That's a really great question. I can go back all the way to when I was a kid. I immigrated to the US when I was 7 years old, first to the San Francisco Bay Area and then moved to Sacramento. And when I was a child, I was living with my parents, and my mom one day had this enormous, unbelievable, enormous rash on the back of her back. It was everywhere, it was very sudden, and everyone freaked out, went to the hospital. And I remember there was a moment where I thought, oh my goodness, like this unknown rash, what could it be? I wish I would, be able to help my mom. And that's, I would say, the beginning of the journey. Of course, I explored various other options throughout undergrad and high school, thought about whether medicine would be the right option for me. And I ended up with the decision of going for a dual degree. And that was, really motivated by a number of experiences. I started doing research when I was a freshman at Cornell under Dr. Jan Lammerding. And I was researching at first a very rare mutation in the nuclear laminin, and that caused a very rare premature aging disease called progeria. And I attended my first international conference during my freshman year, and I had got to meet these patients with these children with progeria. There's maybe a couple hundred of them in the world right now, and it was such, an amazing, I think, journey to hear from both the patient's perspective and also the parent's perspective. And the Progeria Foundation, it was founded by the mother of a progeria patient who happened to be a researcher and had connections at the NIH. So she founded the foundation, and within about 20 years, they went from not knowing the diseases, but the causes, to having a drug in clinical trials. And so that was incredible to see and to hear about, and it really opened my eyes to what it could be as a physician scientist. And so, with my already, established interest in medicine, and then, some exposure to research and seeing the kids and their families in person and listening to their stories, how courageous they were, very inspiring. And I thought, this is the path I wanted to take for my career. And therefore, kind of towards fourth year of my undergrad, I went from applying to MD only to MD PhD.
We actually have never had an MD PhD student on That Medic Network in our healthcare leadership series. So definitely it's nice to hear about your experiences for that. Could you describe your academic background a little bit? So you're currently at Boston University. Where did you begin?
Yeah, so I did my undergrad at Cornell University in biology and society with a minor in cognitive science. I did a year abroad at Oxford University, where I also studied human sciences, which is very much the British version of biology and society. Absolutely enjoyed my experience there, really explored various things. That's where I was first exposed to neuroscience and experimental psychology. I did two research rotations throughout the year at Oxford, and worked with patients with Parkinson's, and specifically looking at, working memory, the basis of working memory, the fundamental kind of concept of it, as well as how it can be used to be a biomarker or cognitive biomarker for dementia of various types, and be able to kind of differentiate between dementia due to Parkinson's versus Alzheimer's. So that's my first really exposure to what research around the brain was like, and I really enjoyed it. I did miss the molecular side because as an undergrad, as I mentioned before, I did my research with Dr. Jan Lammerding at the Weill Institute for Cell Molecular Biology. He's a biomedical engineer by training, and there was a lot of interdisciplinary work with biologists and engineers and looking at mutations as well as cellular mechanosensing. And so that was very interesting, and I really missed the bench side. So going into my MD PhD at Boston University School of Medicine, I sought out opportunities to kind of marry the biological side with the engineering side. And I did quite a lot of rotations, really trying to explore and figure out the right fit for me. I did a year with David Boas, and that was in optical imaging, kind of using optical coherence tomography to see if there's differences in Alzheimer's versus wild type animals, mice mostly. And then also did some exploration in drug delivery. I rotated with Bob Langer, MIT, and Giorgio Traverso. And that was really a fascinating experience. I loved it. It was really great. It was really the epitome of working, a biologist like me, working with engineers and coming up with solutions where they had the engineering background to build the solution. So we actually ended up publishing a paper that used that was a pill that had electronics in it. It was Bluetooth enabled, and then you had sustained drug delivery in that form of a pill. And that was a really satisfying project. Then I moved on to really honing down on Alzheimer's disease and brain research. So I rotated with Rudy Tanzi at Mass General Hospital and Do-Young Kim. They're in the same group. And that's where I ended up doing my PhD work. And I was able to adopt a project. It used to be kind of a side project, applying nanotechnology, nanoparticles to both treatment of Alzheimer's disease and also drug delivery in the brain. So I took up that project as my PhD thesis and am currently completing my work there. And I'm looking forward to doing a Fulbright year next year at ETH Zurich in Switzerland with the multi-scale robotics lab to really apply and understand the engineering and chemistry side a little bit more in terms of tailoring these technologies, nanomedicine, nanorobotics to the field of Alzheimer's disease and potentially also cancer, very applicable to brain cancers and whatnot, being able to overcome the blood-brain barrier. That's such an advantage, and be able to also control it using the system they have. It's a magnetic resonance or magnetic guidance system, essentially, that allows you to control where these particles or nanorobots are going. So I'm really looking forward to that, and that's kind of the gist of my academic and research background.
Thank you. Congratulations on all of this sounds very, very exciting, especially your Fulbright fellowship and your thesis that is getting completed soon. Very, very exciting. I think our viewers would like to also hear a little bit about your experiences founding several startups. I think you also have like a media nonprofit. So could you go into a little bit of detail?
Yeah. Absolutely. I can start with the media nonprofit. So it's very similar to this podcast. So it's a nonprofit entity, and it's in the form of a podcast where it aims to provide up-to-date scientific progress and research to people all over the world. And it was motivated by the founder, Mehdi Jorfi. He is an instructor at MGH and a colleague. I've kind of and also a mentor for me. And he was one day thinking about his experiences in undergrad. He grew up in Iran, and he trained in Iran. And during his undergrad, during one of his courses, they had to, for one of his assignments, come up with some of the most up-to-date scientific discoveries in organic, I think it was chemistry. And he had to go in the backs of the library. He had to go in the stacks of the library to find the most up-to-date information that was available to him. And that was actually from 10 years before. And so, really didn't have access to the most up-to-date information as he was doing his undergrad training, and he wanted to provide some kind of a platform to update scientists, budding scientists and students on these types of things. So he thought, well, if we invite the first author or the corresponding author of these top-notch scientific journals, then we won't be infringing any on copyright laws, and we'll be to also be able to provide information in a fun way. So we were able to bring in a number of corresponding of authors so we were able to bring on a number of PIs from the Boston area and also internationally, who then recently, within the last 6 months, published a paper in some of the top-notch journals, including Nature Science, JAMA, New England Journal of Medicine, etc., and talk about their work, implications, and where it's going, where the field is going. We also bring in some of the pioneers and the legends of certain fields to kind of talk about their professional journey in order to provide kind of a inspiration for young scientists and scientists and students everywhere. And so we brought in people like George Church and Bob Langer and Rudy Tanzi to kind of talk about their journey and how they got to where they are. So very similar to this podcast. So that was really exciting. We also started doing a 360 series, we call it, where we bring in experts from different areas to give a different perspective on one topic. For example, COVID-19 was our first one. And then in the future, we're hoping to expand that series, perhaps in a separate podcast, and talk about essentially the whole story from the bench to the bedside of discoveries in cancer or in immunology, et So that's been really very exciting. It was a lot of work. It was my first time really founding an official entity. And it was a great learning experience. I learned a lot as a founder, as a leader, especially in terms of management of a large team. We at some point had, about 15 or more people in a Science Rehashed team, and we had to figure out how to manage everyone and, almost understand where each of the members' talents are so they can all shine in different ways, and also help them develop some of the professional, experiences that they may need to go to the next step of their journey. So that was all a lot to balance, but really exciting. I love working with the team. It's a very incredibly talented team. I was really proud because we were able to bring in scientists and medical professionals, as well as artists and audio engineers, all kind of working together towards this one mission. We had a lot of good support from the community, a lot of great press. We've been featured at BU Today, Harvard Gazette, MGH, Bench Press, Boston and a number of others, also international. The reason we started an international cohort, so we have this ambassador program where people from all over the world can join as kind of a representative of Science Rehashed in order to spread the word about this resource. And so it's been really wonderful, working with people from, especially, the young budding scientists from all over the world, sharing this one mission and communicating also throughout COVID. It's, been kind of, there's a lot going on all the time. So it was nice to also connect with them in that capacity as well. So yeah, I think it's been a really great experience, and I think I definitely recommend for anyone who has an idea that they're passionate about to just go for it. I think initially I was really afraid. I was like, is this, this is an official entity. Am I ready for this? And it was really in the beginning like, oof, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't feel ready. But if you're passionate about it, just go for it, because you never know where it's going to end up. And the worst that could happen is that you just, stop the entity. And that's the worst thing that could happen. So really, you're not losing much.
Can I start?
Okay, ready? Yeah. 3, 2.
So what do we say for the HLA? Why we took part?
Don't move chin.
Sorry, I'm just going to stop.
Just when you end it.
Don't look away.
Yeah,
That is not going anywhere.
Just another day at the office.
Hi, I'm no.
Most important thing is what I've learned from the HLA and adapting it and moving forward and making sure, I make use of it. The reason why I don't know what to say. If I make a mistake, can I just take a pause and then start again?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I don't know what to say. Don't record this.
I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much, and I've really benefited from. Oh God, what have I benefited from? Oh.
Okay.
Is that it's been a fantastic. Oh no, I've lost it.
Can you give me a countdown?
I don't know how much to gesticulate. How much? He's quite a mellow person. I don't know.
I'm ready.
Thank you.
Okay, I think I'll chop and add some things. We're looking forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.
So there's two other things I've founded recently. One is MINT, which is the Medical Innovation Technology Entrepreneurship Program. So I think at Boston University, despite the fact that we're in Boston, I think entrepreneurship, especially in the biomed, medtech, biotech area, is still, I would say, relatively unsupported at the student level. At the faculty level, it's very well supported, a lot of opportunities, a lot of ongoing support from various offices and departments. But at the student level, they're not quite there yet. And I wonder, it could be a cultural thing, could also just be there wasn't enough of a demand for a while, and therefore they stopped doing whatever programs they previously had, and therefore it never lasted. I'm not super sure what the history of that is, but I've noticed throughout my 6 years here that every time I meet a graduate student or MD PhD student or even MD student, they have amazing transformative ideas, and they have also the skills to, or at least one of the important skills to make it happen. And so I explored entrepreneurship in the last 2 years, I would say pretty much during the pandemic era. You're really looking at, what are the programs in the Boston area. I joined various ones at MGH, at Harvard, MIT, did a week with the Merck Innovation Cup, really informative in terms of the way they run these types of programs and how impactful they can be even in a very short time span. So then I looked into my own university and saw that there wasn't anything like this. There's quite a few programs where they expose you to the idea, but you are really still working on your PI's idea or API's idea. Mm-hmm. So then basically it goes back to the PI once you leave the class or the program, and you don't hear about it at all in the future. So there's no kind of program where you can take your own idea and make it a reality. So I started this Mint program with a group of very talented PhD students and MBA student and a PhD student with very strong backgrounds in in innovation as well as science, and we gathered together, put our experiences together, created this program, and we're currently piloting the first cohort of innovation innovation teams. Right now, we create these cohorts of teams by creating a space for everyone to meet and talk about their ideas and their expertise and how they can contribute. Then they formulate into a small team between 3 to 6 people, and they go through a very much guided set of programs and boot camps and workshops to guide them through the process. So they didn't have to have any type of experience whatsoever in terms of entrepreneurship, as long as they wanted to work together. And at the end, we have a pitch day where we bring in industry experts to judge the various pitches. And we have a grand prize, top 3 prizes as well, given to these teams in order to help them facilitate to the next step of their entrepreneurship journey. So that's very exciting. I think that was, one of those things where I know everyone wanted it, especially the graduate students, but there was just not quite enough of almost institutional support to achieve it. But it was really about finding the right people to support you on this type of idea. And so I think having the leadership team come together, talk about the program, kind of solidify the structure of the program, presenting it to the faculty, and having get their buy-in was really critical. And I think the leadership team did a fantastic job. We've been able to at this point raise over $13,000 to support the program, and we have buy-in from about I think 6 or 7 different departments, and we're also looking for more. Eventually, we're hoping to also get some industry sponsors in order to make this more sustainable, and also partner with other industry and maybe accelerator programs or incubator programs in order to help the teams get to their next step. So that's where I am with Mint.
I think it's definitely a big part of health leadership is being there for the next generation, mentoring people, mentoring students, and as they go throughout their journey. So it's really great how you found a way to do that, and you went through that process, and what you're doing for students is really amazing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point to kind of comment on it, because sometimes in a large institution, you just kind of have to demonstrate it is possible. Because a lot of the pushback I got initially was, I don't really believe that this is going to work. That was kind of the initial thing. And I was like, well, then let's run the first cohort, and we're going to prove to them it does work. And, it is possible. And there are students who are interested. For a fact, there's quite a few people, especially in the engineering programs in the medical school, especially the MD students. They're very, very innovative, and they themselves, if they're not going through the school, they're going some other avenue in order to start their own startup as well. So I've seen that in a number of the alumni when I go and almost look up the previously graduated MD PhD class or the MD class. I see that they have their own startup, and they're working on their own innovative idea. And so it's I know it's there. It's just that we need to, one, create the infrastructure for it, and 2, also make it publicized so that people know about it. And so that's kind of my goal here for Mint. Yeah, and in terms of the other startups, so I'm working on, so previously I mentioned that I did the Merck Innovation Cup, and the Merck Innovation Cup is a application process where you go through with a resume and your cover letter, and they choose the next batch, and then you have to come up with an idea, submit an idea in the next round, and then finally they select a group of students, about 5 or 6 per team. So they have set teams every year that focuses on immuno-oncology, electroceuticals, etc. And you specifically apply to that team. And by the end of the process, they select about 6 people per team to compete in this 1-week innovation competition. And during this week, you work with the team that was selected for you in order to come up with an idea or use one of the existing ideas that one of the members came with in order to solve a problem that also is in agreement with the pipeline of Merck, and this is the German Merck. And then by the end of the week, you pitch you pitch the idea to the panel with a number of different leaders in their fields as well as leaders at Merck. And so within that week, you get to work with their lawyers, you get to work with the resources that's available to you at Merck in order to speed up that process. And so we ended up getting, I was on the electroceutical team, and we ended up getting 2nd place. And what actually was more exciting than being the runner-up was that within a few months, we were able to converse with the Merck Innovation Center, and they essentially are currently adopting our idea into their pipeline. And they hired 2 of our team members in order to work on the idea in order to see if it can be commercialized or not. And I believe this was the first time that's happened to an idea at the Innovation Cup. And so that was very exciting to us to see the idea that we came up with, at least working in the process of being, commercialized eventually and helping patients. This was where I think the medical background was extremely important. We worked with a MD that was essentially one of our main mentors, and he was extremely helpful in guiding the direction of the idea. So even if you came up with a potential solution for something, if it's not the right indication in the context of the clinic and for the patient, then it's still very difficult to commercialize. And so he was able to help us figure out the right indication to pitch and to think about for our device. And so that's really exciting. And I continue working with the team after that process. And now with the 3 of us left, we started a new startup that essentially works on using electroceuticals to modulate the immune system. It's called Inia Biosciences, and it was named after a genus of river dolphins in the Amazons that uses biosonar to communicate. And so Inia is that genus name. So there's, I think, 3 species under Inia, and it's a very fun, I thought, name, and a very suitable name.
Yeah.
So that's what we're working on right now, thinking about applying it to transplant rejection as the first indication. But I think there's a lot of potential for our technology because it's wearable, it's going to be closed loop, integrated with a biomarker sensor, as well as a AI diagnostic platform to be applied to various other indications to modulate the immune system, particularly typically to dampen it. So that's kind of where we are in the process. And that's also been quite exciting because it's still relatively early in the idea stage. We're trying to raise money to get it to the next stage to kind of demonstrate a proof of concept and raise the next round of funding. And that's, I think a really amazing application of the medical knowledge, the limited medical knowledge, I would say, that I have. And it came through as an idea because of an experience I had in the clinic. And so this, as a physician scientist, that was amazing for me to see this concept, this theory actually coming into reality.
I think in our conversation, we've talked a lot about an idea becoming a reality, and just going for it. And based on that, what advice do you have for students interested in medicine, interested in research, just the field as a whole, when they have an idea and they're kind of stuck and don't know where to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, the biggest thing was finding a team to work on the idea with you, because you definitely can't do everything by yourself. You know, you might be one of those superhumans. Maybe you are. You might be able to do everything by yourself, but it's much easier and much more fun if you have the right team with you. So I think as a first step, once you have an idea, to find a few people who you think have complementary skills to work on it with you. And then as the first kind of proof of concept, or, you know, first first thing on your roadmap, you really have to validate it as whether, you know, in the clinic or with patients, is this idea something that's actually needed? Is there an actual unmet need? Or is it just a really, really cool idea that you came up with? Because that happens a lot. And I think one of the biggest reasons a lot of startups fail is because there was very few customers, and there wasn't an actual unmet need. And that was because they didn't do the due diligence of investigating the customers and talking with their customers. As a medical student, it would be easy to kind of talk to patients, talk to physicians, figure out whether your idea is in fact something that would be useful in the future. And also you have to think kind of down the line, because whatever you're developing, it'll take a couple years at least to get to commercialization, if not more, longer. If it's a drug or if it's like a medical device, it could take much longer. Kind of thinking into the future, will it be still something patients need in about 10 years time, or 5 years time, or a few years time? You know, that's also, I think, a really important thing to think about. But once you validate those ideas, those topics, and you're like, well, I have an unmet need, and I'm sure I can, you know, actually resolve whatever problem there is with this unmet need, and it is going to be useful down the line as well, then I would say start looking for support, mentorship, going through your institution and just finding the right people to support you in your journey, whether it's through your Office of Tech Development or through the medical school, or through your deans even. Perhaps they have connections, and you just kind of start networking and figuring out what is the right next step, who to talk to, and perhaps get yourself in accelerator programs or incubator programs so that you can start building that network in order to get you to the next step.
Thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us and tell us about your experiences today. I'm Lahari Ramini. This has been Shen Ning, and this is That Medical Network. Make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on who you would like to see next on the show.
My name is Dr. Siddhar Mao. I am a former HLA scholar, FY2 doctor in West Yorkshire. The HLA is a great experience. It's a unique experience, and it's a personal and engaging mentorship process which gives you a pragmatic and realistic approach to true leadership, which we can take on to all aspects of our career.